Senator Naughton, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Glasgow Hirlock. I'd also like to welcome Minister Hayes into the Shannon today, and this additional 70 million funding on top of the 25 million in humanitarian assistance already announced is to be very much welcomed. I note also that this is only to cover the damage until the 6th of January. The local authorities and the government are to be commended for the speed in which they've considered the damage done and responded to it, and that includes the emergency services who have done Trojan work on the ground over the last few weeks and months. I know for those affected it is never too soon, but in the circumstances I believe it was a good turnaround. The storms which ravaged the west of Ireland before the 6th of January caused more than €19 million of damage to Galway County and €1.2 million to the city. And this figure is undoubtedly a lot higher now due to the subsequent storms. And even today we're getting reports that the winds that are coming to the west and the southwest of Ireland are the strongest in living memory. So I'm sure there are many people living in fear in the west coast. We had Minister Simon Coveney visiting Galway last weekend, and we visited Spiddal, where their promenade is destroyed, a very important local touristic site, as well as many areas along the Connemara coast, and people literally living in fear, wondering what is going to happen at the next storm. In relation to the city, the 4 main areas of coastline damaged in Galway City are Silverstrand, Blackrock to Burdew, Blackrock to South Park and Clada, Ballyloughlin Beach and the Spanish Arch area. A critical tourism amenity for Galway City is the proposed extension of the promenade in Salt Hill to Silverstrand, and thousands of people walk the promenade on a weekly basis. The estimated damage to the area between Silverstrand and Salt Hill Promenade comes to €400,000, and that was pre the 6th of January figures. Galwegians have been calling for years for the protection of this coastline, and in particular the putting in place of buttressing and protective rock armour at the Knocknagonin Drumlin, which has undergone significant erosion. And not to mention the destruction on our islands off the west coast, the Aran Islands and Inishbofin, who have suffered severely from these damages. And again, for tourism and for our Atlantic Wild Way, or Wild Atlantic Way, it is very important that these areas are funded and supported. In relation to future-proofing our coastline, as mentioned in the government statement, I note that regarding a part of the coastline familiar to those in my part of the country, Dr. Kieran Hickey of NUIG's School of Geography has recently said that the entire promenade in Salt Hill, which has acted as a natural coastal defence for decades, quite possibly should, in light of climate change and the resultant higher water levels and tides, should be raised a full half metre. And those familiar with Salt Hill will realise what a huge undertaking that would be, although it may well be necessary in the absence of another solution. In that vein, it should be noted that we, as an island nation, have a long history of flooding and we've always responded in an ad hoc manner. Fix the instant problem and move on. In these days of now obvious climate change, this will no longer do. And will the Minister or the Government give thought to establishing a body with relevant expertise to gather and analyse the various reports on climate change, as they will affect our coastline and waterways, and draw up a long-term programme for flood defence? I realise that the Government's National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy mentions that the OPW has a number of research programmes and has produced regional coastal hazard maps, and mentions a plethora of other bodies involved in planning and research. With the best will in the world, and whilst I realise the constraint on the Exchequer at the present, a long-term strategy really does need to be put in place and work commenced for the future rather than now. This should be done by one dedicated, focused body charged with mapping future change and making recommendations to government, rather than a multitude of agencies feeding into the government at various times through various means. I would urge the Minister to consider this. And just finally, Minister, in relation to the OPW and the relevant departments, with the way they deal with damage in infrastructure, which is not directly under the remit of the local authority or in public ownership, but infrastructure which has been damaged, which is critical to the economic viability of a local area. For example, access to beaches, burial grounds, residential areas. What would be the proposition with how we would deal with areas like that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.